You're back in the smoke-filled room, the only regular podcast where you can get an insider view of what's happening in Illinois politics from a center-right perspective. So we're glad you're here because Election Day is right around the corner. Things are nutso out there, and we got to talk about it. Let me introduce our guests. We've got State Representative Brandun Schweizer from the 104th District. We're going to talk about his race today for sure. He's also a retired Master Sergeant from the Marine Corps. Brandun, glad to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We also have with us former state representative from the 54th District, Tom Morrison. He also now works with Big Tent Coalition as their VP of Recruitment and Training. Tom, what's up, man?
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Apparently, those who are booking our guest today decided that it was just going to be a Palatine episode because also from Palatine, we've got Aaron Belmar. He's the co-chairman of the Illinois Republican Party, also serves on the Central Committee, and is a Republican committeeman, highway commissioner, and a bunch of other stuff. What's going on, Belmar?
Not much, Collin. Great to be on. Thanks for having me again, brother.
We also have, of course, political experts. We've got Chris. We've got Michael. Michael's our Southern Illinois expert. Chris is our Northern Illinois expert. And hopefully today they're going to have some things they can disagree on because that's always fun for all of us. What's going on, guys?
Doing well.
Each week you flatter me, Collin, by calling me an expert on Northern Illinois politics.
Hey, listen, you got to fake it till you make it. And for you, you've been faking it for a while, right?
That's right. I've been faking being a Republican for 4 years now, Collin. See how it's going pretty well for me.
There we go. All right. So as anybody who's watched these podcasts knows, I don't like talking national politics, but sometimes those national politics have an impact on our politics in the state and down ballot. So we're going to talk just one topic here about national politics, but something has been pretty clear in the last few weeks. Harris's momentum has been waning. She's been starting to lose a little bit of that momentum. If you look at the polls, you'll see there's been some movement in just the last 7 to 10 days against her. I don't know if it's necessarily towards Trump, but Harris is losing that momentum, which of course is going to benefit Trump, and it very well could benefit Republicans. We're seeing Democrats kind of freak out a bit, especially looking at black turnout amongst males. You see Obama basically chastising black males, saying they better get out and vote because a lot of the research is showing that turnout and enthusiasm amongst black voters is extremely low, which could be bad for Harris and the Democrats. And you're also seeing Harris kind of stuck in this death spiral that many of us predicted she would end up being in, which is as she loses a little momentum, she goes and does a few more interviews, which she does poorly in, so that loses her even more momentum, so she's got to go do more interviews. And it looks like she is stuck in this spiral that very well may be a circling the drain in the toilet kind of situation. I'll leave you with just a couple of these things before I let everyone else give us their thoughts on what's happening nationally and what it might mean for Illinois. For the first time since the 1980s, Gallup has found more people identified today as Republican than Democrat. First time in over 40 years. In a CNN study, for the first time since 1984, there are more registered Republicans nationally today than Democrats. First time, again, in 40 years. And if you want to compare where Trump is doing right now, in the national aggregators of the polls, he's down just 1.5 to 2.5 points nationally. 4 years ago, he was down almost 10 points at this time. 8 years ago, he was down about 6 to 6.5 points at this time. So you see a lot of momentum kind of starting to pick up for Republicans. Harris is starting to lose a lot of ground. With that, I'm going to ask everybody here, what are you guys seeing in the race? And most importantly, what impact do you think that might have on Illinois?
I'll jump in. Number one, about identifying with Republicans, I think it just demonstrates again that these things can be cyclical. For a while, those of us in the suburbs were beaten down for being Republicans. And, things are seemingly turning around there. So that's a good sign. The other thing about Harris is obviously she came in with, Democrats nationally and locally, they were just so relieved to not have to deal with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. So there was a little bit of a bump there, but you can only inflate someone's enthusiasm, if you will, for so long. The reality is smacking everybody in the face every day. And so that's why I'm encouraged.
Yeah, listen, we've talked about it in this podcast, and I'm curious, Chris, if you're going to give me kudos or props for this. When I said Democrats did this too early, the switch to Harris, they did too early. She was going to peak too soon, and we might be seeing that again. It's early to say this, but it was a masterclass of a move that Democrats pulled. I mean, anti-democracy, but politically, they'll write books about this. But I said that when it happened, they might have done it too soon. She might peak too soon, and that might be what we're seeing here.
Well, Collin,
one other thing I just want to jump in on. Remember, think about where Kamala's political career has been. She has been in a complete bubble in the San Francisco area. So the sort of contest that she's had to face, even when she ran for president, she was running in a Democratic primary.
Yeah.
Now that she has to go in front of a much broader audience, you can see why she's flailing so much.
Totally.
Collin, one of the things I wanted to mention, my son Connor, who's a senior down by Brandon over at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, he came back last weekend, and we were going to do a social experiment around Palatine. And we got him a Kamala Harris 2024 T-shirt, and we had her walk around for a while. And during the time, he got spit on. He had a rock thrown at him. He's been threatened twice, and he got punched in the eye. And that was before he even left the house. And so what we're seeing, but jokes aside, that is always a joke, like to break it up. But what we're seeing here in Palatine, and I've been spending some time in Southern Illinois, is just like you mentioned. The momentum is waning. People are starting to really understand her as a candidate. She's not the bright new shiny toy anymore that she was a month and a half ago. And when they're looking for policy and she keeps ducking hard questions of what she's going to do to make Americans' lives better in the next 4 years versus the 4 years that she squandered not doing anything, people are like, hey, we remember when Trump was president. In those 4 years, we had the biggest economic highs, lowest unemployment. That's what we want again. And I think that's why Trump's starting to move up in the polls.
So to Collin's point earlier regarding the timing of Biden's withdrawal from the race, I still stand by my opinion that it was the right time to do it because they only had a very small window between when Biden dropped out and when they had to go to the Democratic National Convention to put everything in proper motion, because you wanted to do it before the convention to at least give you the appearance of democracy, the appearance that your delegates were doing something that somebody else told them to. If they did it later, it would have been too much of a bait and switch. And I think it was done very effectively by the Democratic Party in this bait and switch that they pulled at the top of the ticket. Now, that being said, the issue that they're running into now is something that we've been saying for a very long time, that the worst possible candidate for Democrats this cycle was Joe Biden. And the second worst possible candidate was Kamala Harris. And she's running into this issue where she's not very likable. And while there is a chunk of the Democratic base that is more enthusiastic right now about Kamala Harris than they were about Joe Biden, the fact of the matter is that a lot of soft Democrats and in minority voters are not very enthusiastic about Kamala's candidacy right now. And, that's a stark contrast for when Kamala came in, where people were saying, the black vote's going to be through the roof. We're going to be approaching Obama numbers, if not passing them. You can tell by the fact that Barack's going out there and trying to appeal to the black male audience to go out and vote for Harris. So they have some type of turnout issue within their polling and their demographic math right now. And my final point is that's what this all comes down to. We're talking a lot about issues, and Kamala's bad on the issues, and she's terrible on the issues, certainly. And she hasn't run a very effective campaign. But at the end of the day, as a result of polarization, a lot of just ends up coming down to, from a presidential perspective, turnout. And right now, the Republican Party still has a more solid turnout potential nationwide because of Trump, because of that enthusiasm. The Democrats are going to have a problem turning out their soft Democrats and minority voters because there's just not a lot of enthusiasm about Kamala top ticket. She can still win because of a million other factors, but certainly this is the reason why we're seeing this momentum go to Trump right now.
Yeah, and I know, Michael, you may want to jump in. Just quickly, I want to point out something. We haven't shared this little tidbit because it's one of my clients, but I got permission to share this. They did some research and did some polling before the switch over from Biden to Harris. And they did some testing on, if it's not Joe Biden, who would you want? And amongst black voters, they didn't want Kamala Harris. They wanted Stacey Abrams. And I think it's an interesting thing to point out just how much black voters, even back then, they were not overly excited about the idea of Kamala Harris being the choice if Biden dropped out. And so I think this data has been around for a long time, and we're starting to see it play out in real time in this race.
Well, and I saw
Collin, one thing I mentioned.
Michael, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, Target Smart, they've been releasing like analysis, state by state of the voter turnout so far and kind of the breakdown. And in the 2020 election, Republicans were at a 33%. At the end of the election, Republicans were at a 33-point disadvantage on early and vote by mail. And right now they're saying at this moment in time, we're at an 11-point advantage. So if that trend continues, that's a 22% improvement on Republicans voting early, voting by mail, which is something that we've all been preaching, and the state party's been preaching for, over a year now. So we're seeing some benefits from that. We're seeing that across the country, that Republicans are showing up, casting their votes early, which is a good sign and shows that people are motivated, and that the Bank Your Vote program is being effective. So that's good. And I agree with everything everybody else said. I mean, she's really struggling right now. You see that. I think it was a mistake on their part to focus on. They've spent a lot of time trying to win over disaffected Republicans that don't like Trump, with people like Liz Cheney and others, Adam Kinzinger. I don't think that's been effective. I think a lot of Republicans have come back into the fold, as we get closer to the election day, and they see the dynamics between the two campaigns and the two visions that these candidates are presenting. So I think that's going to be a factor as well. Plus the union vote. I mean, Trump's doing significantly better now with the union vote than he did in 2020, now that he's not running against Biden. Same with Catholics, African-American men. I mean, Trump's improving in basically every category with the exception of probably women. And Kamala is not, even matching the numbers that Biden put up in any of these categories.
So
If
my
I
hope,
could jump in real quick. So some of the things that I'm seeing at the door, you got a lot of people that really just want to be able to put food on their table, buy clothes for their kids. And it's a constant reminder every time you go to the grocery store, every time you go to the gas station, how expensive everything is. And folks remember, the price of stuff back in the Trump era was significantly cheaper. And it's just a constant reminder every single day, every single week you go and you buy something, you have no money to save up. You want to go to the movies, go to McDonald's, you got to basically put that in your budget, and it's no longer kind of a random, spontaneous event that you can go and enjoy some time with your family because it is so expensive. I got a family of 5. We went to the movies a couple months ago, and it was $150 to go to the movies. It's just absolutely ridiculous how much things cost. And it's just a constant reminder every single day of the cost of stuff. And Kamala's big thing is, you're going to turn the page. We're going to turn the page. We're going to start a new era. And she's part of the era now, and she can't articulate what would be different. And she's having that struggle when asked that question. And she's not coming up with the good, this is going to be different. This is going to be different. I would have done this differently.
Look at what she said on The View. I mean, Trump's team pounced on that right away when she was asked the question, and she said she wouldn't have done anything differently than Biden has done over the last 4 years. And that quote was gold to the Trump campaign. They clipped that, and that's been on ads all over the place because she admitted that Joe Biden's economy is her economy, and there ain't nobody happy with Joe Biden's economy. Tom, whoever had thoughts, let's get some final closing thoughts on this, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I just want to urge, again, because there's so many cross currents on, which voters support, top of the ticket or down the ticket. I guess the point is candidates and their campaigns just have to stay nimble. And if you're talking to a Trump voter, just make sure that person understands they have to vote red all the way down the ticket. Because I've met some Trump voters that they just don't like the Republican Party, they don't like individual candidates, but they love Donald Trump. So they vote for president and then they turn in their ballot. And we can't afford that at our, in our down ballot races. On the flip side of that, I still encounter people who are never Trumpers and they're Republican voters. And so my urging for them is don't stay home just because you don't like the top of the ticket. You have to support our Republicans at the local and state level if you care about things like cost of living, public safety, education, all the stuff that corruption, all the stuff that we know has to change in states like Illinois.
Aaron, you get the final word on this topic.
Well, I think the thing that resonates the most with me and how it applies to Illinois is that J.B. Pritzker is giving out candy now. He's giving out $50,000 to different state reps. Brandon, you know all about that down there in Peoria, Champaign area. If they were so confident that they had this in the bag and Illinois was going to stay solidly blue, I don't think you'd be doling out that money to each of the state rep candidates. I don't think you'd be dropping $2 million to the House and Senate caucuses. They're seeing the polling that we're seeing. Kamala is taking a huge drop. We're gaining ground in a lot of the areas that are purple, that we have winnable districts. And our message of Republican conservative values is starting to resonate with the voters. And we're moving up the polls. And this is a last minute push to try to just buy their way into more seats.
Well, speaking of buying their way into seats, let's talk about. We've got Brandun here. We get to hear directly from him on his campaign. We have said that House District 104 is the second toughest hold seat for Republicans in the entire state of Illinois. So we're glad to have you with us, Representative, and talk about your race and what's going on there and how you're going to keep that seat. Plus, talk a little bit about some of the ridiculousness of the Democrats and the lies they're telling about you and what they're trying to convince voters of to try to get them to vote against you.
Yeah, no, I think overall the race is going really good. If you just look at the money side of it, I mean, any race in this state is going to be lopsided with money on one side of the aisle. But if you look at where that money's coming from, I would say a good 90+% of the people that have donated to my campaign live in this district. And so it's been going really good. I've been getting a lot of good feedback from at the doors. Been knocking, my team has probably hit over 22 to 25,000 doors so far since, beginning of summertime. I personally have hit almost 6,000 doors myself. And I really had one negative reaction at a door with the lady slamming the door in my face after I told her what party I belonged to. We were great, having a good conversation. She asked what party I belonged to, and then it's kind of like I just dropped a nuclear bomb, and she backed up and just slammed the door. That being the only negative response out of the 6,000 plus doors that I've knocked, I think it's shows the effect that our campaign is having by getting our message out there and across. Some of the things that, if you look at any of the mailers, any of the commercials throughout the entire state, they all are hitting on the exact same topics. They're all basically the exact same, mailers that just have different faces and different names attached to them. And the biggest thing that they're trying to tell me about myself is that, I'm a womanizer. I hate women. I don't trust women. They're not, smart enough to be able to make their own decisions. And it's kind of funny to me when you look at the 8 most influential people in my life today is one, my wife. The next one would be my campaign manager, who's a female, Chelsea. And then the 2 ladies that work in my office, both females, Tracy and Barb, my mother-in-law. And then one of the most important would be my mentor in the house, Leader McCombie. And you have the top 8 people that are influential and control my life are all females. So if I didn't trust a female,
I love that addition of the word control. You're going to hear about that from your mother.
Yeah, no. So if I didn't trust females, or believe that, they're able to make their own choices, then why would I have that in my life? And so it's just a shame that
Brandun, let me ask you about that real quick, because
Yep.
Democrats have been trying to make these races, including yours, all about abortion, which, as you
Yes.
said, it's just not what we're hearing at the doorsteps. But even
Correct.
more importantly, that's a working class district. Your opponent tries to claim that he's a moderate, that he represents working families, yet all he and the Democrats want to talk about is abortion, which just isn't what middle America, what working families are really focused on. Maybe the abortion message plays in some of the suburban communities that are more liberal, and that's fine, but that's not your district. And so, I'm
Correct.
fine when my opponent makes a mistake. And it feels to me that they're making a big mistake here, trying to make it all about abortion when this is a community that they care about cost of living and the fact that they're struggling to make ends meet. That's what they're focused on.
Yeah, losing jobs, struggling to make ends meet, putting food on the table. I mean, it's that message that they're trying to push throughout the entire state is that abortion is on the table. It's the most important thing, when in this state, it's not even close to being the top of the reason why people are going to get out and vote. I've brought up abortion has been brought up to me 3 separate times at doors in about the 6,000 plus doors that I've knocked. I've only had somebody ask me 3 times what my stance was on it. And so it's just not what is being brought up at the doors. It's not what people are focusing on. It's, maintaining good jobs. It's being able to bring jobs into the state. It's being able to put food on their table, lower the cost of living, lower property taxes, so we can all afford to live a little easier here in the state. And that's basically the opposite of what my opponent's doing. He has raised property taxes, or he has voted to raise property taxes 3 times in Champaign County alone in the 3 years that he's been on the board, being able to do so. So it's just, the hypocrisy, the lie that they're telling just to get people out there, scare them to come and vote is kind of ridiculous.
I mean, is that part of the reason why they're trying to change the message there? I mean, I've seen the ad you guys have put out, $4 million and over $4 million in property tax hikes in just 3 years of being on that board. I don't know if he wants to talk about cost of living, because that's the only record he has is raising people's cost of living.
Yeah. And so it's that, you know, saying that he's going to bring down property taxes when he's done just the opposite, and the small opportunity that he's been able to do so, bring down the cost of living. He's raised the tuition price and the cost to go to Parkland twice now in the 3 years that he's been there. But yeah, he's saying one thing and doing the other. You know, he's calling me extremist politician, and then he's talking about me not having any political background and being, you know, a newcomer. He's talking about, you know, one thing in one area and then another thing in another area, and it's just, I mean, I personally don't think it's working with the responses that I've been getting.
Well, unsolicited, take this or leave this, because I know there's only a couple weeks left, but I've seen some of the stuff you guys have put out, and you're hitting them rightfully so on property taxes. So my company's done a lot of work with community colleges. People love their community colleges. And I didn't know that nugget you just said about him raising the cost, the price to go to community college. I got a feeling there's a lot of working class families in your district who'd be maybe even more mad about that than the property tax thing. So again, maybe you have put it out and I just haven't seen it, but I think it's a pretty powerful nugget for working families, knowing that your opponent has raised the cost of community college for, frankly, the lowest income and middle income people of our community. I think that's a pretty solid closer. Just a thought.
Okay.
I can tell you this right now, from a person whose son goes to Parkland. Now that I know that, I'm even more aggravated. And make sure to check your mailboxes. I'm sending you a check, right? Because I just got that tuition bill, and I'm going to get another one in a month and a half, so my son can attend down there in Champaign. I think that's a resonating argument.
I've got a poll for a client a couple years ago, community college, where anything was on the table to balance their books, but don't touch the tuition. That was like the third rail. Do not touch this. Everyone, even those who were more wealthy, didn't want it touched, even though they weren't sending their kids to community college, because they thought, hey, listen, for lower income families, you're going to raise their tuition and keep their kids out of this college. So I remember that poll vividly. And if he's raised those tuition rates, that's a horrible thing for him. Well, we're watching your race with bated breath. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts. Aaron, I know you were talking and I kind of jumped on you there, but anyone else has thoughts on that race? I mean, there's a lot of people who are prognosticating on 104. It's going to be one of the toughest holds, but I know Republicans were really pumped when Brandun was our candidate. I know there was the potential for a primary there, but that was taken care of and peacefully, which is awesome. And everyone's been talking about how hard you're working, and people are pretty big fans of your campaign manager, Chelsea. So people are talking highly of your race. We're hopeful in a couple of weeks that means we're all celebrating.
Yes. Yeah, I feel confident. And, you know, I mean, that's, like I said, we just the amount of support that I've been getting throughout the community itself. I know signs they don't vote, but everything that I've been told, you know, I have about 3 times more signs out there than my predecessor has ever had. So, again, they can't get out there and vote, but it's amazing to see the overwhelming support that I've gotten throughout the community itself, and being at doors, knocking on doors, talking to people, and, you know, gathering their support. It's amazing to see.
That's awesome. Anyone else have thoughts on the race before we go to our next topic? We got a bunch to get to, so it's okay if you guys are good. I'll simply say this to our viewers. We purposely want to highlight some of the top races in this state. It's a big state, but there's only a few districts that we can make a difference in here. Some whole districts, some pickup seats. And so no matter where you live in the state, check out Brandun, check out his campaign, do what you can to help. You can send text messages even if you're outside the district. You can make calls, you can donate. Heck, you can even drive down and knock on doors for him on a weekend. Brandun, what's the website they should go to for more information on your race?
Brandun, the number 4IL, and that's Brandun with a U, BRANDUN, the number 4IL.com.
So did your parents just really want to confuse people with the spelling? Is that
either that, or they just really wanted me to be unique?
There you go. I like it. All right, let's keep moving along. We got some more races to talk to. Let's talk about aisle 17. If we're going to pick up a congressional seat in Illinois, it's going to start there at 17 with Joe McGraw. But it's a tough fight. Both sides are fighting. Sorensen on the Democratic side, but we've got McGraw going up on TV. He had a really good fundraising quarter last quarter, raising over $400,000. Not a ton on hand. Sorensen has more, but that's expected from an incumbent. But to see a challenger raise over 400 grand is really cool to see. Speaker Johnson's coming in to host a fundraiser for him in Peoria on Sunday. He just got the Tribune endorsement in his race. He's definitely showing some serious momentum in the race. The reason why I say Sorensen's putting up a fight, I just want to say this. I never want to give kudos to the Democrats, but Sorensen's ad about helping a World War II vet get his medals, that new ad they came out with, it was emotional. It was a story. It was compelling. It's everything I teach nationwide on how to do a good TV ad. It's my early front runner for best ad of the cycle, and it's annoying to me that it's the Democrat who did it in our top race congressionally. So Sorensen's certainly not going down without a fight. This is going to go all the way to the wire. Curious what you guys are seeing in aisle 17.
You know, it's interesting the way the Democrats are playing this, because you can tell what congressional races they're worried about and what congressional races they're not really worried about by some of the messaging you're putting out there. In 17, you have this, pretty solid ad with the medals, which I've seen other Democratic congressional candidates, incumbents do before, but still a very, very solid ad. They're going negative and they're going positive. Really solid ads there. But in some of the suburban districts, I've been getting some mail and having some people send me some mail in some of these districts, and really it's just the Democrats hitting their solid, pro-choice, anti-Project 2025, Trump the threat to democracy, some really just standard Democratic puff pieces
Just
that you
copy
send.
pasta.
Yeah, the copy and paste jobs that you see from the Democratic Party. So you can tell that the Democrats are taking aisle 17 seriously, and I'm glad to see that the Republicans are starting to take aisle 17 a little bit more seriously. $400,000 might not be a lot in the grand scheme of things for a congressional race, but in comparison to where some other congressional challenges are at right now, that's pretty solid. I think there's still a chance that McGraw can win this race, but it's going to require a very, very solid final 2 weeks of the campaign, getting that message out there and getting their base out. Because while the district's in play, it's going to require some pretty substantial rural turnout, and it's going to require some very substantial blue-collar shifts to the Republican Party in order that make that district in play. But they've done their job. Is it the perfect race? No. But again, I'm glad we're taking it seriously sooner rather later. Better late than never.
Collin, one thing that I've been seeing, I've been doing some traveling around Illinois, as you know, on behalf of the state party. And I've been fortunate enough to have been to 4 or 5 of Judge McGraw's rallies, events. And I can tell you one thing, he is working hard. He is the Tom Morrison of congressional races. He's taken that shoe leather and grinded it to the stump.
I want to see Tom in a leather coat on a hog. I think that'd be worth it.
Yeah, but when I go to these rallies, you have an expectation to see, 20, 30 people. They're driving 100, 150. Some of these rural areas of Knox County, Warren County, McDonough, but he's getting support out of Henry County. We did an event for him up in Lake County. The minority leader, Scalise from the U.S. House of Representatives came out and did it. You're seeing a lot of really cool stuff that is happening in this race. And then to top it off, to have Speaker Mike Johnson coming out next week tells you that this is certainly one of their tier 1 races. There's a lot of opportunity. And from everything that I'm seeing across on the grassroots level, I think he's got a really good shot to win.
Leaving it open, making sure we get everybody's thoughts. All right, we got everybody covered there. Listen, I thought McGraw's ad was solid. It was hard hitting, hitting all the points you need to make to show how extreme Sorensen is. Now, the NRCC was running a very similar ad. Again, this is what the Democrats do to us all the time. They paint us as extreme, and we so rarely fight back when really it's them. It's their policies that are actually extreme. And so to see McGraw and his team fighting back, as Chris said, is everything perfect? No, but most people don't run perfect races. And in this district, this is our best chance at a pickup on the congressional map at that level, and a lot of people are saying it's going to go right down to the wire, so we're going to see. All right, let's move to some state races. We've talked a couple of times now about how hypocrite Harry Benton has been caught a number of times now saying things against his opponent, Gabby Shanahan, that he also happens to agree with. And it's happened yet again in his race. The campaign for Harry Benton put out a mailer saying that he supported the elimination of the grocery tax, but actually he didn't even vote on the bill. And he's attacking Gabby Shanahan for attacking her for accepting contributions from politicians who, quote, voted to block funding for testing rape kits, except so did Harry Benton. He voted against the budget as well. So here we go. Harry Benton yet again caught being a hypocrite in his race and basically just saying whatever the heck he wants and hoping he doesn't get called out for it. And kudos to the Republican Party. They had quotes from Bessler in a press release going after him. Hopefully they use this against him hard, because one thing voters will not accept and not forgive is if you lie to them and if you're a hypocrite. And Hypocrite Harry is absolutely a hypocrite in this race. And I think it could really hurt him if Republicans use this well in that race. Anybody else have thoughts on 97?
Yeah, two things to say about that. And I think it was Aaron who addressed this earlier, just the copy and paste nature of so many Democratic campaigns. We see this all across the district. So that's point number one. Point number two is they keep bringing up these issues, and we have to educate voters about it, that when there's a budget vote, it might be 2,000 pages, it might be 3,000 pages. And the way the Democrats do this is they craft it behind closed doors. They do what's called a shell bill. So there's, some totally unrelated bill that they then strip out all the language of that and they shove in the budget for the year. And then that's what gets voted on. And in these mailers and these ads, the Democrat, usually the incumbent, they'll cherry pick certain line items out. I think it was in the 2020 cycle, maybe 2022, they were accusing Republican candidates for wanting to defund the police. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How possibly would Republican candidates or Republican incumbents support defunding the police? Oh, they voted against this massive budget that raised taxes, that provided pay increases to lawmakers, that did all this kind of crazy stuff, all this kind of pork barrel spending. Oh yes, and of course, it funded the state police. So if you have an up or down vote, if you voted no, well then obviously you don't support having any state police whatsoever.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous tactic. I've long advocated on this podcast that we should use it against every Democrat who votes no on that budget, because Democrats want to act like they're fiscally responsible by voting no. And then fine, you know what? You do it to us, let's do it to you.
Tom brings up a really good point. The Democrats are fond of using that poison pill legislation tactic. But in this race in particular, some inside baseball for those that are at home. From what I'm hearing from some of my other state rep relationships is that the House Democrats are really pounding on this one, not because they like Harry so much. It's not because they hate Gabby so much. It's because she happens to be a secretary for IPI. And they just can't handle the fact that somebody from the Illinois Policy Institute, regardless of their position, just a paid secretarial staffer, could get a House seat. And so part of the reason that they're spending so much money and time, treasure, and talent on this race is because it's personal for them to try to punish IPI. And I think that's just ridiculous. If we have a good candidate, it's an opportunity to grow Illinois. And I think doing it for personal reasons, like from what I'm hearing, is ridiculous.
I mean, Welsh has always hated IPI, but we actually had a segment on a podcast months ago because they were hitting Gabby on that tie, and we said she shouldn't run from it. Right now, she's saying, "Well, that doesn't define me," and whatever she wants to say about IPI is her right. But I would simply say, okay, I work for nonprofits that want to lower costs for working families and make Illinois a better place to live. I mean, I don't think she needs to run from this, because I think the only people who hate IPI are down in Springfield. Voters don't know who the heck IPI is. And so I wouldn't run from it as much as she is. But Aaron, you're right. Welsh hates IPI, and this is just personal for him, which is why they're putting so much effort into this race.
Look, the thing that frustrates me a little bit about this whole situation is that this is the second flub that Harry's had regarding being a hypocrite and saying one thing and doing another. And it really goes to show you that, like, the other side in this, the Democrats, if they had half a brain, they would have looked up Harry Benton's voting record and been like, hey, this guy didn't vote for the budget. This might not work as well here as in other races. But they didn't do that because this is just simple copy and paste politics. They're not doing a particularly convincing job at the Democrats for the Illinois House. They really aren't. But the fact of the matter is that they're going to keep getting away with this unless the Republicans can actually peel off some victories and make them hurt for their hypocrisy. That's the big picture in regards to all of this. While Harry has done these, hypocritical things and said one thing and done another, the way you make these things stop is just by beating them. And the House Republicans are putting a lot of money into Gabby Shanahan's race. And whether or not it's going to pay off, we're going to find out on November 5th, I suppose. But the fact of the matter is that the way you stop these tactics is you just beat them by using them against them.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, let's keep moving along. Let's go to 81. It's interesting. This has come up a couple times recently. House District 81, which the incumbents and Stava-Murray and the Republican candidates Aaron Porter, the Republican organization, party, what have you. This isn't a race that's top tier in their focus. But interestingly enough, you've got Tim Ozinga, and I don't know if it's Tom. You can tell me. I don't know if it's through Big Tent or if he's doing it personally. So I don't want to speak for you guys on how that's happening. But he's put a good amount of money into Aaron Porter and into that race. And now we see some mail being sent from the Illinois Reform PAC, which best I can tell, that's a Wisconsin PAC. I think it's funded through some RSLC money. So it's interesting to see that 81 starting to get some focus. It's not really been looked at even by us. We don't really have it in our top list of races we've been looking at. So I want to open it up, but Tom, I'll let you start on should we be looking at 81, or maybe is there something bigger at play here? We don't know. I mean, listen, that district itself isn't great for Republicans, but Stava-Murray is super far left. I mean, even Democrats don't like associating with her. So, she doesn't necessarily fit that district, but the district is pretty blue. Curious, Tom, and then the rest. Should we be looking at 81, or what's the deal here?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be a great pickup. We've been working very hard with Erin on the ground. And again, you said it. She is so far out of line, even among her caucus. And every month, every year she's in office, she gets less and less careful. I would urge you guys to look at the Daily Herald interview that they had. So it was a back and forth between Aaron and Representative Stava-Murray, and you could definitely see that we'd gotten under her skin, and actually it was the constituents who had gotten under her skin because of some of the crazy bills that she's filed, some of the crazy statements that she's made, and so probably the icing on the cake was this bill that she sponsored that would accuse parents of being child abusers if they don't get on board with their minor child doing a gender transition.
Yeah. So just to be clear, not accused, label, like officially.
Yeah, label. Oh yeah. No, I mean,
as,
you'd have criminal consequences to the parents if you're not 100% on board with what your minor child starts to pursue.
Yeah. I mean, she is absolutely, again, as these Democrats in Illinois feel more and more safe, you start to see their real colors come out, and it is not the moderate party of the Madigan days. This is a far left progressive Democratic Party in the state, and you see it in races like that. I'll simply say this: the reason why we haven't looked at that race too closely, and other Republicans haven't. Trump lost it last time by 23. That's a huge delta to overcome. Now Trump is doing better this time around, but still, it just does make it a little bit difficult to look at a race like that. However, locally, it's only a D+4 district. And so while Trump kills us, locally, it actually isn't as blue as people think that it is. And so the question is, can you overcome that Trump impact in the district and get people to focus local and focus on how crazy she is and how she doesn't represent the working families of that district? If you can pull that off, Tom, you guys may be able to crow about one of the surprises of election cycle, even just getting it close. Let's be real here. I mean, Stava-Murray won it by 16 last time. If you guys bring that into low to mid single digits, let alone win it, you're going to surprise a lot of people.
Well, what you don't know about Aaron is he's a lifelong resident of the district. He's a current police officer. So we see public safety as being a big issue there, especially with some of the recent crimes that never happened in DuPage County. Carjackings happening in that part of DuPage. It's nuts. But Aaron is a great family man. And we just think that this is going to be a good race.
Well, and you look at her voting record. I mean, she is one of the most radical members of the General Assembly. What was it? About 2 years ago, she threatened to primary Dick Durbin for U.S. Senate because he wasn't liberal enough. So there's a lot there. And we saw probably 6 months ago, she was one of the first Democrat incumbent state representatives to get two paid staffers by House Dems. It was her and Katie Stewart. So that shows you that there is some fear on the Democratic side of this seat, potentially being in play. They wouldn't hire 2 staffers if they didn't think they had a problem there.
And Michael, it's interesting. It's different, right? We talked about it back then. The reasons why those were the 2. In Katie Stewart's race, they were worried about the race itself. In Stava-Murray's race, it was just to hopefully control her so she doesn't do or say something so stupid that it costs them that seat. Because let's be real, it's not just progressive politics. It's also just a little bit cuckoo. And so you had to put 2 staffers in that district just to try to keep her under control until Election Day.
Well, there's 24 hours in a day, and I think if that's your goal, you'd probably need 3 or 4 staffers working on a rotating shift.
Yeah, I think the Stava-Murray district is pretty similar to a district in the Senate. That's Senate District 43, which is Rachel Ventura. And Rachel Ventura and Ann Stava-Murray kind of make up the Cuckoo Bananas caucus of the Senate and the House, respectively. So even though these districts, they're D plus 4, Collin said, D plus 10 when you get up to other races. These districts are only slightly in play because of how terrible their incumbents are and how much the other side of the aisle also hates them. So I'm glad that we are making some type of play against Ann Stava-Murray. She is genuinely one of the worst people in the House, based on her voting record and her ideology. So I'm glad we're making a play at her. Will it pay off? Math is hard, and DuPage County loves abortion, so maybe it might be difficult. But still, the point is that it's a terrible incumbent. Make the play, see what happens.
And listen, we beg Republicans to have a long-term view on this podcast, and this just might be one of those districts. As I said, with Trump at the top of the ticket, you might run an incredible race and still possibly not pull it off just because that 23 points is rough. But 2 years from now, there's no presidential race. And so let's say Aaron doesn't pull it off this time. If he's willing to run again, you might be pointing to this race as one of those surprise pickup opportunities in 2026. I know, Tom, you guys aren't putting all this time and effort to not win this November, so no disrespect to that. I'm just saying Republicans got to have more of a long-term viewpoint sometimes. And some of these districts are only out of play because of the top of the ticket, because of presidential politics. And so if you could get somebody to run a solid race, build a base, maybe win, maybe not. But in 2 years, when there isn't a presidential election at the top of the ticket, you might be putting yourself in a pretty good position. So at minimum, that's what we're doing here.
Yeah, and with the next year's budget and the budget the following year, we all thought this year's tax increases of $1 billion was bad. It's about to get a little worse in the next coming years, just because everything's been pushed off, until 2025 and 2026. So I think, if Aaron doesn't get it this year, in 2 years, with the amount of tax increases that are going to be coming to try to satisfy the budget that they're going to have to do, is going to be a really good chance at that point as well.
Yeah, because certainly she's not going to be amongst that moderate crew, moderate crew of Democrats who are revolting and saying they're not going to vote for more tax increases. She'll certainly vote for any tax increase that comes across her desk. So, Brandon, that's a pretty good point you're making there. All right, let's keep moving along. We got a lot to talk about. Daily Herald's been rolling out their endorsements, and there's 3 I want to highlight. Amy Grant in House District 47 has gotten their endorsement. She's in one of the toughest. We've got it as the 3rd toughest hold seat for Republicans. Some people have it as the number 1 most difficult hold seat for Republicans in the state. Marty McLaughlin in 52 got a glowing endorsement from the Daily Herald. Again, a tough hold opportunity for Republicans. And then one of our top pickup seats in 45, Dennis Reboletti, got the Daily Herald endorsement. Those 3 are really solid. And I like to look at the Daily Herald simply because you expect the Tribune to be a little bit more conservative, though lately not so much. You expect the Sun-Times to be pretty liberal. The Daily Herald tends to try to play it a little bit more in the middle. And so when they've come out for these 3 districts, I think it's noticeable. Not that newspaper endorsements make as much of an impact today as they used to. However, again, those 3 seats getting the Daily Herald endorsement, certainly worth looking at, and it's worth talking about. So anybody have any thoughts on Amy Grant, Marty McLaughlin, or Dennis Reboletti?
I think the Daily Herald has a long record of generally supporting incumbents, so I wasn't really too surprised.
One thing I'd mention on a couple of those races that you just mentioned. First, Dennis Reboletti, who is, out of that Elmhurst area, formerly served in the Illinois House, knows what it's all about, understands that campaigning, got redistricted, took a solid for the party and jumped in the race and has done a really fantabulous job. Some of the internal polling that I'm seeing has certainly him within the margin of error. I think that is a race that could be a really strong pickup for the Republican Party. I carry a little bit of Martin McLaughlin's district here. He's running against Maria, who ran against Dan McConchie for Senate last time. Dan squeaked out a win by 3% of the vote. She's running up in that Lake Barrington area. I don't think a lot of her policies are resonating. Her campaign is being run and marshaled by Nabila Saeed, who is the state rep in the 51st district. So you can see that they're really trying to pull that northern area of Barrington, Lake County farther to the left. And, Marty kind of started out a little bit slow. He's got a walk team that's out there. I think they're on their 10th or 11th mailer. So we're seeing a lot more of his production and utilizing the budget. He's done a pretty good job of fundraising in that area. Sanalitro's race in the 48th, she's just a fabulous candidate. She picked that seat up back in 22, where a lot of people, thought there might have been a more contested primary. She carries half a Seth Lewis Senate district in there. I don't think the Democrats really care about that seat too much. They put up a no-name candidate. They're not really doing a ton of support to run against her. I think they're just going through the motions in that race. But I think there's a lot more that we have. I think we're going to go in the next segment that are going to be more pinnacle and going to be more possible pickups for the Illinois GOP.
Yeah, listen, and I didn't mention, you're right, Sanalitro also got the Daily Herald amongst others. I simply didn't list her because we've talked to this podcast. I don't think she's in play. Democrats really, as I've talked to, don't think she's in play. She's done a great job working that district. So to your point, 48 looks pretty safe and pretty solid. But yeah, she also did get that endorsement as well. All right, yeah, and I'm looking at these three races. They're going to be big races. I mean, as we look at election night, we're absolutely going to be looking at Amy Grant. There's some who are claiming that she's going to be at risk in that seat. A lot of people are nervous about McLaughlin, though, as you said, they've really picked it up in the last couple of weeks. I'm excited about Reboletti's race in 45. I think he's definitely got momentum here going towards Election Day, and that could be a great pickup for us. And to pick up a seat in the suburbs during a presidential election year would be huge. So these are, I think, notable, and we'll have to keep an eye on these races. All right, let's go to another group that's been rolling out endorsements. Michael Butler, our own Michael Butler, kind of hinted at this last week because this rolled out almost basically as we were recording last week's episode, and we already had a packed agenda, so we couldn't sneak it in. But the IEA's PAC, IPACE, have rolled out their endorsements, and there's a couple ones, they mostly endorse Democrats, but there's a few here that were pretty notable. They endorsed Jackie Haas in 79, which is a district that Democrats have been looking at. I don't think, and some of the others we've had on here don't think Democrats have a shot here because Jackie Haas has done a really good job. But seeing IEA line up with Jackie Haas is a big deal. You mentioned Sanalitro in 48. She also got their endorsement. Keeven Schmidt in 114. So they endorsed both Schmidt and Greenwood, which, Michael, I'll pass it to you in a second to talk about. And lastly, they're staying out of House District 45, which I know, Chris, you want to talk about. So, Michael, let's go to you first. Talk about the fact that they endorsed both the Republican and the Democrat in House District 114.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So about a month ago, IEA had a meeting in Fairview Heights. They invited both Keeven Schmidt and LaToya Greenwood to that meeting. They let Keeven Schmidt speak, but they did not give LaToya Greenwood an opportunity to speak. And then after that meeting, the local members of the teachers union voted on who they wanted to support in this race. The local members voted to support Keeven Schmidt. Obviously, Springfield, they didn't really like that very much because they typically just endorse Democrats across the board. So there's this strain between local members and local leadership and the leadership in Springfield. So at the end of the day, they decided that they were going to endorse both candidates, LaToya Greenwood and Schmidt, which Will, that works over there at IEA, he told Keeven Schmidt that he's been working there 18 years. This has never happened before. So they're trying to figure out, what is the next step and what do they do? If you look at State Board of Elections, IEA's PAC, they've written $5,000, $10,000 checks to a lot of these candidates that got endorsed, but they have not written a check to date for Keeven Schmidt or LaToya Greenwood.
Definitely puts them in a trick bag. I mean, Michael, how much have we talked about this, about how union membership tends to lean more towards Republicans, especially nowadays, whereas leadership leans the other direction, and you're seeing it play out right there in that race. And if I'm Keeven Schmidt, if I have to pick between the two, I'll take the members because the members can actually vote in my race. So if the members are with me and leadership is with her, if I have to make a trade, that's a trade I'll happily make.
Well, and you would rather neither candidate get money than LaToya get money. I mean, she's going to be able to send, if she got,
I don't know, maybe, but I think, with how much money's behind her, I think Keeven, it's like the widow's mite. He'll take an extra $5 or $10 grand, but you may be all right.
Yeah.
Chris, why don't we jump over to 45? I know you've been talking about this. I don't know if it's made a podcast. You've talked about it internally, and we've hinted at it. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk about this in the podcast about how the interesting situation here with Marty Deuter and Dennis Reboletti with the teachers union specifically.
Yeah, the interesting thing about House District 45 is that they're saying neutral in House District 45. They haven't endorsed either candidate. And I was honestly expecting them maybe to even endorse Reboletti in this race.
They should have.
It seems like Reboletti's voting record down in Springfield, combined with his connections and his rhetoric on the education issue, it seems to be more, at least, passionate about what the IEA is going for down in Springfield than Marty Deuter. Deuter hasn't really gone out of her way to please the teachers unions this entire cycle. So I was expecting Reboletti to get a lot more strong support. What I'm assuming happened is someone from the speaker's office, or just similar to what they did with the Keeven Schmidt race, where they endorsed both of them. They're staying neutral in this one, basically saying, hey, don't stay out of this one. We'll figure it out later, because on paper, it seems like Reboletti would have been a slam dunk endorsement for the IEA in House District 45, and it would have been really helpful to his chances in that district. But they're staying out of it, probably because the Democrats might be calling in favors. Who knows? There's precedent for it going around, but I think Reboletti might be stronger for them than Deuter is.
Yeah, I wish they had the guts to do it. I mean, again, they're going to endorse mostly Democrats. That's fine. But if you want to show, hey, listen, Republicans, there's a reason you guys should actually be talking to us and working with us. This was a great chance for them to do so, to come out and say, you know what, in a tier one race, we're actually going to endorse a Republican because, as you said, Reboletti is the exact mold of a candidate that they would really like. And so I was a little surprised and very disappointed that they didn't endorse. But I'm imagining it's what you said, Chris, that there was a lot of pressure on them not to do so. But I'll be honest. Again, I'm the politico who always finds an opportunity in every situation. I'm getting a list of teachers and I'm putting out a little 4x6 postcard, not spend a lot of money on it, just something to every teacher in that district saying the teachers union has refused to endorse Marty Deuter in this race, because I think it's notable. I think you can point to the fact that 90+% of Democrats got endorsed, but they refused to endorse Marty Deuter. I'd send that out to every teacher in the district, maybe even some of the parents in the district, because I think the fact that they didn't endorse her, even that is notable and usable in a targeted fashion. So again, we're not involved with the Reboletti race. We've got some friends who are, and they're working their butts off, so they probably aren't happy that I maybe just added more work on their plate. But even this is an opportunity for them if they use it. All right, any other thoughts on IEA and some of these districts before we go to the next topic here? All right, we're steaming along. Good job, guys. All right, Democrats in the House are now up on broadcast TV. I think most of our audience is going to know the difference between cable TV and broadcast TV, but if you don't, it's a heck of a lot more expensive to get on broadcast TV. It's questionable as to how much value you're going to get per dollar spent on broadcast, because a week of broadcast TV with solid frequency in the Chicagoland area is going to be $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, depending on which stations you're targeting. And so this is when you've got unlimited money, I guess you could do stuff like this. But Democrats are up on TV, and it's less expensive out of the Chicagoland area. And they're up on TV in the St. Louis area against Schmidt and Keeven in 114 and 112. And they're up against Reboletti in 45 in the Chicagoland area. And from what we're hearing from our contacts, and other people have reported this is just the beginning. They've got all sorts of money, and they're going to be putting up a whole bunch of other of their candidates up on broadcast TV for the final few weeks. To me, if they want to waste their money, I'm all for it. They've been up on cable TV a lot, and that's a little bit more targeted. Broadcast TV in this era, when most people are getting their consuming their media on streaming and using OTT and other ways to reach those voters, you want to spend millions of dollars on broadcast TV, I'm frankly all for it if you're the Democrats. So,
Collin, I have a theory about this. Since I've gone through a couple of tier one races where they ran, attack ads against me on broadcast TV, I agree with you. If you think about it, Chicago is what, an 8 million population media market? And these state rep districts have what, about 110,000 people?
Yeah.
And at this point in the campaign, who is still left out there that's on, sitting on the fence? Couple thousand people, maybe. So here's my theory on it. I think it's shock and awe. I think, to your point, the Democrats have the money, and so they throw up these really tough ads, hard-hitting, punch-in-the-face ads. And I think the design is to get the Republican and his or her supporters to just be paralyzed. Like, oh my gosh, how do I fight against this? They're going up on broadcast TV. When really, again, how many people are you actually going to persuade?
Tom, that's a very interesting point. I was going to say something very similar to that. Not necessarily just shock and awe, but it may be just to force the Republicans' hand to also do the stupid decision to go up on broadcast TV with 2.5 weeks left of the campaign. Because I've seen campaigns like this play out, where your opposition goes on TV and you're like, oh no, well, I have to go on TV now too. And the Democrats have money to blow, and they're vendors. They want to get some TV profits going on this cycle that they haven't gotten yet. So they're obviously going to encourage the Democrats to go up on TV with these subpar ads. And then what their goal is, perhaps, is to make Tony McCombie or anybody else in the Republican Party in these campaigns be like, do I need to go on TV now? My opponent's on TV. I think that might be more what it's about shock and awe, certainly. You could paralyze and demoralize your campaign by doing this, but you might force your opposition into doing something silly by going up on TV too.
Possible. Listen, where it does make sense a little bit more is for 112 and 114. You're not paying as much out of that St. Louis media market. You're still wasting a good amount, but for Democrats, it doesn't really matter this cycle. So I think it's a little bit more valid in those two races. What I found interesting, and Michael, I'd like your thoughts on this, and anybody else who'd like. What I found interesting is that one of the ads is about MAGA extremism and January 6th and threats to democracy, and that's against Schmidt. And then one's all abortion against Jake Keeven. It's interesting that they've got two completely different narratives in those two races. We noted, Michael, in the last couple podcasts about how Democrats have been moving away from the abortion narrative when it comes to their race with Greenwood against Schmidt, and you're still sticking with it with Katie Stewart against Jake Keeven. I haven't quite figured out why. Maybe they're sticking with it in one race but not the other, but I don't know that region as well as you do. I'm curious what you think.
Well, I think that the Keeven district is more like suburban, kind of in the traditional sense. You've got towns like Maryville, Edwardsville, Glen Carbon. So I think that message probably, the abortion messaging probably plays a little better there than it does in Schmidt's district, because Schmidt has some pretty rural areas like Freeburg, Millstadt, Marissa, towns like that where that abortion messaging doesn't really resonate as well. And then I also think, we've seen the polling on African American voters, and, they're more socially conservative, kind of like Hispanics are. So maybe that's what they're going for there. But I do think that it's kind of, when you do broadcast and the St. Louis media market, that means that people in Missouri are seeing your ads as well. And we get all the ads from Missouri, and, the Missouri people get all the ads from Illinois. And it's not a cheap media market. It is in comparison to Chicago, obviously. But it's pretty expensive.
One thing I'll jump in on here, guys, and and I love political consultants, especially the three of you that are on this podcast right now. I got a ton of respect for what you do, because you guys do it right. However, there's a lot of bad actors in the political consulting business. It's a cottage industry, as many of you know, and they get a percentage of all that ad spend. So remember, a lot of these consultants that are out there are getting paid per missile launched, not per missile landed. So if they got ad budget and they want to get their piece of that action, they're going to keep firing mail. They're going to do television, radio, any way, Facebook ads, any way they can spend that budget so they get their 10 to 15% of that ad spend. And there's going to be diminishing returns. Right? How many mailers can you do, right? After 15 mailers, does 16, 17, and 18 even matter, right? If you start getting these, become inoculized to each of these messages, right? Like, you've heard it already. You keep mailing to me. If you look at what they did in the Irving campaign here in Palatine, I got like 25 mailers. I was like, I'm tired of receiving this mail. You're clogging up my mailbox. So I think it all comes down to dollars and cents. That way they can spend that budget, get their piece of the action, and then they can come back to all of their donors. Hey, we spent all this money on this last election. It was an incredible cycle. We needed to hold our super majorities. We need you to fund some more, come to our events, because they know that money's never going to stop.
Yeah. Well, and kudos to Aaron. It's a good wordplay there. Inoculized. We've created a new word on this podcast, and it plays real well. So good job. Brandon was going to jump in. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, and I was going to say, speaking of the Jan 6 and extremists, I haven't seen the video yet, but one of my friends has said they saw it sitting in a golf course ball or a bar, play up on a CNN that I'm an extremist and that I agree with the Jan 6. So it's funny that you had mentioned that about, Kevin Schmidt not being out there. and just the recycling of the same stuff, trying to make something land. They've had, I mean, I don't even know how many different mailers have come. And it goes from me being, against women to being extremist to not being a politician to being a career politician to being funded by MAGA extremists. And it just seems like they're trying to throw wet noodles at the wall and see what sticks just to hit something. And at some point, people just get overwhelmed with it and they're going to stop paying attention. And then your message is just going to be, not getting out there.
Well, and candidates really have to stay on their game plan, because when those ads start airing, to your point, Brandon, I had people calling me from, some high school friends of mine I hadn't talked to in 20 years. Other people in other districts. Oh man, I saw that ad on TV. They're lighting you up. Well, I'm talking to someone on the phone who's not in the district, who's not going to be voting on this race. And it's just eating up that precious time. You have hours and minutes to go until election day. And candidates just have to stay on your game plan and don't let those things sidetrack you.
Well, especially, listen, Democrats know our weakness, and one of our weaknesses is we do struggle staying on message. And so I certainly wouldn't put it past them to have that be part of their equation here of let's just keep trying to push Republicans off their message, because they know the economy is in our favor, that cost of living topics, tax topics, economic topics, that plays for Republicans. The more they can get us to talk about anything else, the more they're going to win.
Well, not only just getting off message, but also getting off your game plan. Whatever your game plan was for persuasion, get out the vote, banking those votes, that's what you have to focus on, not how they're attacking you at this late stage. Again, when we're talking about the Chicago media market, if you're running for state rep, you have 100,000 plus residents that you're going to be serving. You cannot worry about what the other 7,900,000 people may or may not be seeing on their TV screens.
Yeah, fair point.
Well, and I think that these messages that the Democrats have been putting out there, the abortion messaging, the MAGA extremist, those aren't really effective like persuasion messaging. They're like turnout messaging. I've knocked 1,600 doors in the Metro East between Keeven and Kevin Schmidt. I've had one person bring up abortion to me in all of those doors. And when I explained to that individual what our position was on that issue, she said, okay, I'm voting for Keeven. Thank you for explaining that to me. So I think we have to be, like Tom was saying, like Collin, you were saying, we have to stay on message, and it's cost of living, cost of living, cost of living. Don't get sucked into these debates over whether, Trump and abortion and these issues that are polling very low for those undecided voters. It's not the issues.
One thing I want to clarify, we always like to make sure we're giving helpful information to our viewers, and that's Republican candidates and leaders throughout the state. One thing to be clear, I'm okay with Democrats over-focusing on abortion for the reasons we've talked about. But one thing to note is that the threats to democracy narrative, it is still top 3 issues amongst the voters, and it's especially potent with seniors. And so when the Democrats are coming out with these ads, it does make me a little bit more nervous. These ads will work a little better on threats to democracy than the ads on abortion. And so if I'm going to deal with something, I'm going to look to seniors to make sure I point out that it's the Democrats who are extreme, not me, if they're running these types of ads against me. I just would point out that when we look at the issues every quarter, and we're about to do it again in the state of Illinois in this final stretch, looking at the issues that are resonating with voters, threats to democracy works especially with seniors. And so that's the only caveat that I'll add, that the abortion message, when I see them pushing that out, I'm like, all right, cool, let them do it. The threats to democracy narrative, there's a little bit there that could hurt us, especially with seniors. So just keep that in mind in your campaigns, that narrative does work pretty well with seniors, and you want to make sure that, as Aaron said, you inoculize yourself. I might use that now, Aaron. I like it. Just because specifically with that subset, that message has been working pretty well. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's keep moving. Let's talk fundraising. So the third quarter fundraising reports are out. As expected, Democrats have a huge cash advantage. A couple things I want to point to. We won't spend too much time on this, and I certainly won't read the whole list, but a few things stood out to me. Number one, individual candidates, especially Republican candidates, have done very well with fundraising, whereas Democrat candidates individually have not. They're getting their money from the unions and the special interests, whereas I'm looking down this list of Republican candidates, and some of them have done actually a pretty good job raising money, especially out of their district. Obviously, they're getting swamped with Pritzker's money, the union's money. I get get that, but kudos where it's due. Some of these Republican candidates have actually upped their fundraising games, especially within the districts, and that deserves some applause because it's something we've been really asking for them to do. The flip side of that coin, the reality is simply that Democrats have a ridiculous amount of money. In the Senate, Democrats have a 9-1 cash advantage. In the House, Democrats have an 11-1 cash advantage. And that was based on the Q3 reports. That's before Pritzker started opening up his wallet and giving, as Aaron said earlier, $2 million to each caucus, 50,000 roughly to a bunch of candidates. So the Democrats are going to have a massive cash advantage here going into the final stretch. We knew it. We've always known it. This isn't news, but we still do have to talk about it. Open it up to everybody for your thoughts on what impact this is going to have in the final few weeks.
Well, look, it's not necessarily about the cash disadvantage. I mean, that's what we've always the Republican Party is always going to be at a cash disadvantage in the state until Ken Griffin packs his bags, moves back to Illinois, or Michael Butler lives the mega millions and then he just funds the state party for the next 20 years. These are two options, but neither of them are very likely to happen. The issue is the overwhelmingness of the Democrats' money. That's the problem, because as someone in a left-leaning political blog so eloquently said this week, when you have all the money in the world, you can just do whatever the hell you want. There's no repercussions for it. And that's really the issue with fundraising nowadays. And it hurts me because while Republican legislators have been doing a better job fundraising, I'm still seeing at a county level in the collar counties a lot of even greater cash disadvantage for the Republicans in some of these districts. And it gets really frustrating because you're talking about you got some county Republican candidates out here who don't have 5 cents to rub together, and that's a problem. So while I'm encouraged by the fact that the Republican Party might be getting a little bit better at fundraising, we need to do a little bit better, a little further down the ticket, just so we're not getting bogged down by everything. Because it's not just the discrepancy at the legislature level. If you're getting outspent 11-1 in a House race, but you're also getting spent 11-1 in the county board race that overlaps with that district, well, that means the Democrats really have like a 22-1 cash advantage over you in that particular area. We need to close the gap down ballot because it'll help our candidates a little bit at the higher ends of the ticket.
Chris with the Common Core math. I like it.
Well, I would say it's a good strategy that the Democrats have figured out for the last couple of years or decades in this state is to continue to raise tax money and the price of everything. So the normal person can't give a lot of money because they have to spend it on their taxes and groceries. And then you have these billionaires that are running the state and these union heads that are giving all this money to the Democratic candidates. It was a good strategy that they figured out a long time ago.
Incumbency protection. Make it so unaffordable for working families that they can't donate to Republican candidates.
Yep.
There we go. That's an interesting take. I kind of like it.
One of the things, Collin, and I don't like to pick on him because he's not here on the podcast. Patrick Finkson, comes out in Illinois. Love him to death. One of the best dressers out there, but I always like to disagree with him because he's always like Chicken Little. The sky is falling. We're going to get crushed. We're going to lose 7 House seats this year. It's going to be a horrible Republican year. Article after article. And I just don't see this happening in this cycle. I think that this is an opportunity for us, even with Trump at the top of the ticket, which hurts us a lot, to be able to pick up 2 or 3 more seats. And I think that's what we need is an incremental gain in this cycle. So then we can look at 2026, pick up a couple more seats because the ball has to be in 2030. We got to do 2 out of 3 things. 1, we got to win the governor's seat. 2, we got to be out of the super minority in the Senate, which is going to be the hardest lift. And 3 is we have to be out of the super minority in the House of Representatives because that is when the redistricting happens. And if we are out of a veto-proof minority, and we control the governor's seat, we can change the whole scope of Illinois by controlling what these districts look like. And we can start putting our districts back together in a comprehensive way. I mean, Tom Morrison is on the call with us right now. He was my state representative in Palatine for a decade. He was our state rep. He carried all of Palatine, a little bit of Wheeling. As soon as they redistricted, they chopped Tom's district up into almost 4 different House districts, right? Because they had to hide the Republicans somewhere and they had to dilute us somewhere. So getting guys like Brandun, keeping them in the House, picking up 3 seats are going to be incremental. And we have to keep our eye on the ball for 2030 because that's when we can flip a lot of Illinois around.
I'm waiting for Tom or Aaron, somebody to be like, listen, it's grassroots, money doesn't matter. I mean, come on, I expected this, and
Well,
you're not throwing the punch.
I want to keep things moving along, but I will say, kind of dovetail what Brandon just said. I like to remind voters why, you have J.B. Pritzker has been governor, has spent, cumulatively roughly $250 million to get elected and reelected, and then to help fuel super majorities in the House and the Senate. They also have a very, very friendly media. Why should any of these incumbents have to spend anything? Voters should absolutely love what Illinois is and the policies that we enjoy here, right? These should be slam dunk races, but it's not. They have to spend the money because they have to try to change the narrative. They have to try to confuse or deceive voters, and they have to try to demonize their opponents. And
it's interesting that you say that, Tom, and I don't have a fully formed thought on this just yet. But there's a something here. There's something embryonic. There's something germinating here about, Democrats always beat us on this driving the wedge and saying, Republicans are for the wealthy. There's got to be some sort of a wedge we can drive on this, and some doubt we can sow in the minds of voters of, listen, have you ever thought about why they're spending so much money to trick you into believing that they're doing the right thing? Again, I'm not exactly sure the best way to do that, and this is probably more of a 2025 strategy once we're out of election season, but there's something there for sure.
You want to
with the money advantage that these guys have, they also should be covering their back, right? I'll be the first one to put the fortune teller hat on for just a moment, because if J.B. Pritzker doesn't run for governor in 26, right? Maybe he runs for Senate, maybe he goes away, maybe whatever. But if he doesn't run in 26, these guys are going to have a major problem, because they're going to have the Rauner effect, because they're so used to getting these millions and millions of dollars from sugar daddy, J.B. Pritzker, right? So much sugar that everybody in the state of Illinois is getting diabetes right now, right? If that goes away and their fundraising ability goes down and they're used to getting that money, it's going to be the same thing that happened to the Illinois Republican Party when we were used to getting all the money from Bruce Rauner, right? We don't know how to fend for ourselves. And I think that's going to be a bigger challenge and another opportunity for the Illinois GOP.
Fair. Chris, close us out on this.
I'm going to give you guys a very pessimistic outlook. The sad reality may be that they don't need to spend all this money to win these seats. And that's more of a map problem than it is a campaign problem. In some of these seats, it's very possible the Democrats could spend $100 on yard signs, on like 5 yard signs, and win them just because they drew the maps. That's me playing devil's advocate and being the most pessimistic person in the room because Finkston isn't here. But, maybe at the end of the day, all of this is smoke and mirrors, and all of this Democratic spending is nothing more than to keep people employed and keep vendors in business. It could be the case. It's just one big scam to make sure that certain people get paid and certain people make money. That's not, within the realm possibilities. Everybody keep that in mind.
Well,
all right,
can I jump in one last thing that I wanted to say is, my opponent's coming at me for being funded by extremist MAGA billionaires, and there's only one of us that has gotten a check written to him from a billionaire, and it's not me.
Yep. I mean, listen, we've got to turn this around on them, because they've had this narrative for decades that Republican Party is the party of the wealthy, party of the rich, when the facts show that actually the wealthy vote Democrat 2-1. They donate to Democrats 3 or 4-1. The Democrats are the party of the rich now. Republicans are the party of working families. And we're seeing that. Even Pritzker's own Think Big America in their presentation during the DNC said that their narratives on trying to paint Republicans as for the rich aren't working anymore, because voters just don't believe it anymore. We've got to lean into that and really emphasize that fact, because over the last roughly 8 years, this has really flipped around, and now it's Republicans who are the party of the working class and working families. We just got to do a better job talking about it.
And I did read this somewhere. I got to find it but so nothing that I read, you always got to take it with a grain of salt. But it said that 75% of the U.S. billionaires are all part of the Democratic Party, or all vote Democratic. So it's no longer the rich being funded by Republicans.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's keep moving along. We're almost out of time here. And as always, we like to talk about a few topics that aren't specific to certain districts. One I want to talk about is this. We've talked a lot about how Republicans need to talk about cost of living. And I've gotten some pushback of, oh, we are. And I see all these mailers. I mean, every day I get 10, 15, 20 of these mailers sent to me. So I see them all. And some of these mailers that Republicans are pointing to saying, see, we're talking cost of living. I look at it and I'm like, but no, you're not. And so I tried to think this week, what is the disconnect? Where are we struggling? And I really think it's this. So give me a second to set this up and then we'll talk about it. For me, it's really that we're struggling with burying the lead. I want to tell you a quick story. There's a story told, Nora Ephron, who's a story from a long time ago, but she was in her first class as a journalist, and her professor gave everybody in the class something they had to do. They had to write the lead of a newspaper story. So we reeled off the facts of what they needed to cover, that the principal of their school announced that the entire faculty next Thursday was going to travel to Sacramento for this seminar on teaching methods. And the speakers were going to be these high-powered speakers, and he listed them off. And he said, okay, go. And all of them sat there. I mean, this was old enough. They were sitting at their typewriters. They all sat there and they wrote their stories, giving off all the facts and listing who was going to be there and highlighting who was going to be there and how it was a big deal. And these teachers were going to learn, and it was a great thing. And he said, you all failed. Here's the deal. You all buried the lead. Here's the lead. Next Thursday, there's no school. And everyone was like, oh, yeah, because the thing their audience was going to care about the most was that next Thursday, everybody was going to get school off. And why? Because of this symposium and blah, blah, blah. Here are the details. And this is where we sometimes struggle, but it's not just us. I don't mean to rip on Republicans here. It's just, I've noticed this more and more that we're bad at this, where we bury the lead, where we sort of give the details and the facts. I know, in some of our races, and it's including yours, Brandon, so forgive me, I don't mean to attack this, but it's, where we're saying this year, Democrats raised taxes by $1 billion. And then they went and they spent $1 billion on non-citizens. And let's cut taxes and prioritize our spending on Illinois families. You can give all those same details without burying the lead. The lead is, families are struggling and Democrats are wasting your money. You could use all the same words, all the same information, but don't bury the lead where you say, well, your family's struggling to make it by. Democrats, and my opponent especially, raised your taxes by $1 billion and then gave all that money to non-citizens instead of you. That's wrong. I'm going to help the working families in my district. It's the same details. It's just not burying that lead because voters don't pay attention. You get a couple seconds in a mail piece. You get less than a couple seconds on a digital ad as they're scrolling. You have to capture their attention, and you can't bury that lead. And that's where we seem to be struggling as Republicans. Our details are all accurate, and we're hitting on those cost of living things like raising taxes and everything else, but we're burying the lead. We've got to really hit voters in the face with our message because they're not going to connect the dots on their own. Give them that headline, give them that theme. Don't get lost in the issues. We're hitting LaToya Greenwood for being a tax and spend politician. We're using phrases like inflation instead of cost of living. We'll talk about how they've doubled the gas tax, and this is all good, but we need that headline to really bring everything together. And that just seems to be where we're missing it. And that's why when I say talk cost of living, talk cost of living, talk cost of living, and then Republicans come back and say, but we are. And then I look at the mail piece, I'm like, no, you're actually not. It's because of that concept that we're just struggling with this. We're burying voters in detail. We're giving them all these stats and facts and details when that's just not how people think. Those are subtext. Those are things you add to prove the larger point. The larger point is that Democrats are wasting your money when you can't even afford to buy groceries. That's the headline, but we seem to be struggling with that. And so to those Republicans who are saying we are talking cost of living, I urge you, think about what you're leading with. What's your headline? Because when your headline is, Katie Stewart can't get her priorities straight. No. The headline is Katie Stewart is extreme, or Katie Stewart is wasting your money. Not she can't get her priorities straight. We're losing that chance to frame the race and really just let the headline carry the day, because 9 times out of 10, the headline is the only thing that voters actually pay attention to. And so just, again, some of you may agree with me, some of you may disagree, and that's fine. That's why we want to talk about it. But really, as we urge people to talk about cost of living, it isn't just add 7 bullet points about taxes. It's use it as your headline. That is what voters are talking about at the doorstep. And so that needs to be our lead, not the bullet points. It needs to be the lead. Anybody have thoughts? Am I wrong? Am I right? Am I crazy? Am I just being too mean?
No, I agree with you. I mean, I've been getting a lot of negative mail on LaToya Greenwood, and it always starts with, LaToya Greenwood's voting record, like as the lead. And it should be, cost of living is a serious problem in Illinois because of LaToya's voting record. And what I'm seeing is this is Latoya's voting record, and that's why your cost of living is high.
Well, listen, to your point, look at the digital ads that they just started running, and they're an uptick in quality. So let's start there. We have said Republicans needed to up their quality in these House districts, and these video ads they're doing over the last few weeks have really been an improvement in quality. So kudos to the Republicans. But you just mentioned Greenwood. I mean, here's one of the ads. Latoya Greenwood loves to raise taxes. She voted to double the gas tax, a $5.4 billion income tax increase. She supported Pritzker's progressive income tax. It's so many details. And then finally, the real strong line, we can't afford Latoya Greenwood, we can't afford her, is buried at the end. We got to lead with this. We got to run with this at the start. I mean, the Katie Stewart stuff is even worse. She voted for a $3.7 billion tax, and then to give $1 billion to illegal immigrants, and then to pay herself. And it's so much detail that we're losing the headline and the lead.
I'm more concerned that Michael's getting the persuasion mailers against Latoya Greenwood. Why is the hardest?
I think they're being sent to him. I don't think he's actually getting them. He's got people giving him copies of them.
Are you getting them in the mail, Butler?
Well, my roommate gets them all. It's his name, not mine.
Okay. Fair enough. I was worried that Michael Butler is on the persuasion universe list for the House Republicans, and then I would have to really start asking questions about what kind of targeting they're doing over there.
Oh, listen, it's a free-for-all topic, but it's really just about that message. We know the message that's resonating at doorsteps. We know it's working. We need to hammer this home really effectively over the final couple of weeks, because as we just talked about, we don't have the money the Democrats have. We have to be that much more effective. Democrats can be bad at this and still win because they can put out 10 mailers to our one. Our one has to be that much more effective.
Yeah, Collin, I just got, I saw a mailer the other day from a Republican, and the text was just way too small. And I mean, I read it because I'm
because you're a nerd.
I'm hyper interested in this kind of stuff. But again, the average voter is not going to read that fine print.
Yeah, especially when it's all stats and facts and numbers. I mean, we teach classes on this around the country. Maybe we got to do a whole round of them in Illinois next year. It's how do people think? And it's just people don't think like we six political nerds do. We're going to read every word in that mail piece, but the average person, or watch all 15 or 30 or 60 seconds of your ad. But that's not how the average person works or how they think. And so you've got to keep it. Don't get steeped in the detail. Let the detail prove your larger point. Think about how Democrats are really good at this. They say, I mean, sometimes they make it up. They say Brandun Schweizer is a far-right extremist when that's just not accurate. But then they use the facts as, in a little parentheses on the bottom. This is what proves our attack. We spend all of our time on that subtext, the stuff that should be in size 6 at the bottom of the mail piece. That's what we make the headlines. Democrats have that flipped around. I love that Republicans are strong on issues. We are right on most of the issues, and we like to embrace that fact. I love that. But we got to think more as marketers, as promoters, as salespeople a little bit, because we're trying to reach voters who they don't think issues. They don't think inflation. The word inflation to them, when we test that, is not impactful. Inflation as an issue doesn't move the needle. It's cost of living, because that's a concept they can understand. It isn't inflation. It's the price of gas. It's the inability to take your family to go see a movie, as Brandun said. We've got to stop focusing on features and focus on benefits. It isn't the bullet points of features. It's how will this make your life better or worse? And this is where, as Republicans, not just in Illinois, nationally, we have struggled, frankly, for decades, but we've got to get better at it, because Democrats are decently good at it. All right, that's my soapbox issue for the week. Appreciate you guys all sticking with me. All right, with the limited time we have left, we're going to get to just one more topic. Let's just do this one here. We've gotten word lately from a number of sources that the big fight coming up in 2025 is going to be pensions. Pritzker's been hitting at it for a while. A number of people have been hitting at it for a while. And we've now got multiple sources who have confirmed that the unions are hoarding their cash as they look to 2025, because they want pensions, especially tier 2, to be increased so that their members can get more of their money. And this is going to be the big fight of 2025. It's worth talking about. We've got a sitting legislator, a former legislator. This is going to be the big push in 2025. While, as Brandun said, we're going to be facing a massive deficit in the state of Illinois. Unions are gearing up for what's going to be a big ask for money down in Springfield. And what the unions ask for in this state, they tend to get. And so it's worth thinking about. It's worth talking about. Well,
I'd like to remind people, I mean, the pension line item and Medicaid line items are the two largest line items in the state budget. If you look at city and county budgets, their pension obligation is a massive, massive chunk of their budget. So it may not be a fun topic to discuss. It's obviously highly charged emotionally if you're an individual or you're married to somebody who's in that system. But there will be no tax relief. There will be increasingly difficult times ahead funding core government services if we allow that to happen. I mean, if you look at other states, the reason why Illinois' credit rating and a lot of the municipalities within Illinois, the reason why credit ratings are struggling so much is because of pension debt. And the reason why property taxes are so high is because of pension debt. The reason why higher education costs in Illinois, like in-state tuition, like we were talking about earlier, why is Illinois so much higher priced than other states? It's because Illinois can't dedicate more funds to higher ed because 20% plus of its budget is just going to the 5 state pension plans.
It does raise questions. I mean, Brandon, obviously your opponent is one of the heaviest funded candidates in Illinois by the unions. The question is why? Obviously, they think that Jarrett Clem is going to be a champion down in Springfield for this pension focus they're going to have next year. I mean, that's certainly a question for the voters of who do you want down in Springfield? Do you want someone who's going to focus on the costs for working families or pension sweeteners for government employees?
Yeah, it is a charged topic when you're talking to people about it. And it's extremely hard to be able to fund the pensions with the way they are right now. If you look at the reason why the deficit is so large is because the Democrats used to use that as their own personal piggy bank, and now if you look at the reasons. Or now you look at this year's budget, they took $175 million out of the road fund to be able to supplement money into the general revenue. And so the reason why our pension system is so broken, in my opinion, is because of the fact that they used to take money out of it to be able to fund other projects. And now the taxpayers are paying this money into the road fund to be able to have better roads, have better bridges. And now again, it's being utilized as their own personal piggy bank to be able to fund other projects. And so until we can get our heads wrapped around, we have different pots of money for specific reasons, and we got to stop pulling those out for other benefits or for other projects. You got to be able to look at the budget, balance it, look at the programs that are duplicated, look at the programs that are being funded, and are they actually working? And if they're not actually working, why are we still funding those programs itself? We can utilize that money elsewhere to do a lot better. And instead of just continuing to raise our taxes to fund all these programs that may or may not be working.
Well, and Brandon, I love that you brought that up. I mean, there have been studies that have shown that the roadways, especially the bridges in the state of Illinois, are in absolute disrepair. This money's got to go towards our infrastructure. And I think Republican or Democrat, we can agree with the need to invest in our infrastructure. And that politicians are swiping that cash to spend on things like benefits for non-citizens. This is something worth talking about. And now we got to spend even more on pensions. We've got to put even more money into it because we're wasting it elsewhere. This is a conversation that absolutely needs to be had. And the question comes in again, do you want these? Is this funding? We have a finite pot of money. Are we going to put this towards mental health services and education and helping those who are the most needy? I think we can all agree that that's where that money should go first. All right.
Yeah, my personal opinion on it is, we have a promise that we made to folks that grew up working in the unions, that you work so long, this is what you're going to get. We have to be able to honor that promise that we made to people. So we got to take a deeper look at the budget itself and figure where we can move money around and be able to afford that, putting it into the pension instead of raising our taxes, which most likely next year, that's what's going to happen. They're going to increase the taxes on all of us to be able to fund that instead of actually taking a deeper look at the budget and figuring out where we can cut line items or what programs aren't working, what programs are being duplicated.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's looking at this millionaire tax and looking at that pot of money like, ooh, how can we get access to this pot of money? What's on your ballot? This is going to be used for property tax relief is not accurate in the state of Illinois. You give them more money, they're just going to spend more money. That's how this works in the state of Illinois.
Or
Hey,
you
listen,
just
Chris and I
incentivize more
have been
people
pretty
to-
pro-union Republicans. I've gotten grief for it. I don't know about you, Chris. So none of this conversation isn't about do we fund the promises that we've made to union workers today. It's about do we now say, okay, let's fund that and give y'all some more when there's a lot of people in line looking for more funding from schools all the way on down. There's a lot of people who need more money. That's what the conversation is about. Not do we fund the promises we currently made. At least I'm not disagreeing with you on that point, and I don't think many people are disagreeing with you on that point. It's do we add even more to that pot now? All right,
Yeah,
we're
not
over our
to get
time.
more. I was gonna say not to get more into federal national news, but if the OSHA mandate that's coming out with regards to the fire stations and the fire districts, if that actually takes place, there's going to be a lot of fire districts and fire stations. They're going to have to upgrade their equipment, their trucks. And so where is that money going to be coming from? So there's a big push to ensure that, some of this doesn't get implemented from the OSHA standpoint. But there's also, if it does, and all the regulations actually get mandated, then there's a lot of fire districts that are, not going to be able to afford new equipment, whether it's fire trucks. And even if they are able to afford them, the folks that are making the fire trucks, the companies right now, are already backlogged by 4 years. You want to get a new ladder truck, you put an order in now, you're not getting it for 4 years. So that's what the way the standards are now. If the standards increase and we now have to get all new fire vehicles because it can't be over 10 years old, you're not going to get another vehicle for 25 plus years. So what are we going to do at that point?
Interesting. That's not something we've even looked at. So thanks for
Outlaw fires.
that. It's the fire that's at fault, right? It's the fire's fault. All right, let's close this down. As always, we end with a fun segment here. Our OG and Clown of the Week nominations. No one's required to participate. If you'd like to, though, this is our chance to nominate somebody in the past week. Ideally, Illinois politics, but it could be anything that you think deserves extra praise or scorn. Anybody, if you'd like to, jump on in.
My Clown of the Week is Tiffany Henyard, because Mayor of Dalton, she announced today that she will be seeking re-election, as we all expected. This lady's a narcissist, and she thinks so much of herself as a super mayor. That means supervisor and mayor. That's something I learned recently. But she has announced a re-election for Mayor of Dalton. I'm presuming the announcement for her re-election is township supervisors in the pipeline. So grab your popcorn. I think Dalton actually has a primary in Dalton. So you're going to get like a February 28th race or a little halftime entertainment for your municipal election cycle in Dalton. So Clown of the Week, Tiffany Henyard. If you win re-election, then there's something terribly, terribly wrong with this state, and we all need to consider new jobs. Thank you.
Yeah, I think like Brandon Johnson, we've had so many Tiffany Henyard stories submitted to be talked about, and it's just because it doesn't have a huge impact statewide, we haven't covered it. But I've got like 40 different stories here about Tiffany Henyard and how awful things are in Dalton and Thornton Township. So certainly it's a popcorn type situation, but I think just like Brandon Johnson, she could probably also have permanent status for Clown of the Week. Other thoughts?
I would give my praise of the week would go to Benjamin Netanyahu, the IDF, and the people of Israel for killing the loser Yahya Sinwar.
So that just broke today, right? The Hamas leader.
Yep.
It's a solid addition. I like that. I didn't even say international, but you made your own rules. I like it. Anyone else have thoughts? Aaron, I'm disappointed. You got nobody, Aaron?
No, man. It's been a long week.
You're like
for
the
me.
peacemaker here. What's going on? Who's this new Aaron Delmar?
I've been a little jet lag coming back from London and seeing what it's like on the other side of the pond. I'm just getting warmed up and back into Illinois Republican politics. I've only had 3 events this week to go to. Next week, I'll do a lot better. I got a couple events on it. Here's the one. For any of your viewers that are out there that love Republican politics and want to see what's going on from a conservative perspective, I'm WGN on election night. Check it out. There is going to be at least one Trump fighter on that show. And of course, Chris, they're going to be having your best friend, Pat Brady. He is going to be the other so-and-so Republican on the panel. So I'll be making sure to throw a couple of right hands and left hooks and an uppercut for Tom Morrison on you guys' behalf. And but check out WGN election night if I don't see you guys before the podcast.
It's a strong move. Aaron's giving himself not only his own OG nomination, but it hasn't even happened yet, and he's already nominated himself. My only nomination this week isn't for anybody in particular because I don't know who's doing this, but I've got a Clown of the Week nomination. Those of you, we've all been involved in politics, and we all know sort of the slimy stuff that happens behind the scenes. And one of those things is just people sort of ripping on their own party, their own candidates behind the scenes when they think they might be looking bad on things. And I don't know what it is, but there's this movement lately for somebody or somebodies to start talking about McLaughlin's race already and saying, hey, listen, it's his own choice to not get House Republican assistance because he didn't pay his caucus dues. They've been pushing this narrative that he chose not to get Republican money. He chose not to get help, all because he didn't pay his dues. It's a clear effort to start to lay the groundwork where if McLaughlin doesn't win, it's not our fault. And I hate this BS. After Election Day, if you think things could have been done differently, fine. Go ahead and speak out. But we got 2.5 weeks left to win this race. Let's not start laying the groundwork where, oh, it's not my fault if Marty doesn't pull this off. He didn't pay his dues, so I didn't have to help him. I just think it's total BS. We got 2.5 weeks. We're all on the same team. Let's go win these races. And then we can do a post-mortem afterwards. And if afterwards you want to say what you want to say, that's fine. But right now is not the time to be running down our own candidates when we're this close to the finish line. So that's my Clown of the Week nomination. All right, as always, we close with final thoughts. Everybody who participated gets a chance to talk about whatever the heck they want in our final thoughts. Let's start with our team members. Michael, go ahead. What are your final thoughts for the week?
My final thoughts are, these satellite voting locations open on the 21st all across the state of Illinois. So there'll kind of be expanded access. So make sure you get over there and cast your vote if you haven't done it already, because we need strong turnout across the state, especially in these districts like Brandon's, where we got a fight on our hands.
All right, Christos.
Never call me that again.
You're Greek, man. I turned you Greek for today.
Please never do that. Anywho, we have 19 days today, 18 days when you're watching this tomorrow. This really is when the rubber meets the road, everyone. This next week starts GOTV season. Get out the vote. So make sure you're going out there, setting up your days of action, getting your door knockers out there. Get your phone banks going. Get every warm body you can to the polls who's going to vote for you. Don't leave anything on the table. And by God, somebody get me a cigarette.
Aaron, fresh off your trip with Brandon Johnson to London, what are your final thoughts for the week?
You know what? My thoughts of the week are this. You know what? It's an opportunity for us as a Republican Party and conservative voters to show what we really mean. Rocky Balboa gave the best line ever. He says, it's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And I think for the next 18 days, that should be the mantra of the Illinois Republican Party, conservatives, and everyone watching this podcast. We've been beaten up a little bit, but now's the time to push through that pain, get to the finish line, and get a couple of victories on November 5th.
All right. I like it. Yo, Adrian. All right. For who brought the heat, it's a tie between Tom and Brandon. But since Brandon's our sitting rep, we'll let him go last. Tom, go ahead.
All right. I would just say make sure that we're running through the tape. For some candidates and their teams, it's exhausting, and just dig a little deeper, find that extra energy, run as hard as you can, because you want to be able to tell yourself, look yourself in the mirror, I left it all on the field. And as someone who won a tier 1 race by 43 votes, I will tell you that pushing hard through 7 p.m. on election night, and then even afterward with some of the mail-ins that came in, it does make a difference if you want to be on the winning side.
And Chris, I think will echo. It doesn't even end at 7 o'clock on election night. Some of these races, you're back the next morning and watching these votes get counted. So it doesn't stop on November 5th for some of our top races. Brandon, thanks for being with us. You brought the heat. Final word for the week. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys allowing me to come on here. You all said wonderful things. There's not really much more I can say about getting out there and getting the vote out. It's extremely important. We can take this state over if we just get out there and we actually vote. But my final thought is I want to give a congratulations to the Fighting Illini for squeaking out a win against Purdue. They got another tough test coming up Saturday against Michigan. So go out there and get that W, and let's enjoy this.
I'm wondering why you're not wearing like an orange tie or something. Like, you got to go full on Illini here. All right. Thank you, everybody, for participating. To our producer, Lane Davis, for all the hard work he does pulling this together. Thank you, Lane. In the coming weeks, we'll not only do our SFRs, but we will have a couple of extra videos for you all, talking about what's happening on the ground, keeping you posted on what's happening. And then on Election Day, like we do every year, we're going to have a portal for you to go to watch the latest election results, analysis by Republican and conservative experts throughout the state, telling you what's happening and why it's happening. So stay tuned. We'll keep you informed of what's happening. In the meantime, in between all that, get out and knock on some doors, send out some text messages, maybe make some donations to good people like Brandun Schweizer. If anything, get him a fly swatter so we can get rid of the stupid fly that's been bothering him the whole episode.
Yes.
With that, we'll say thank you all. We'll catch you next time on the Smoke-Filled Room. Thank you, everybody.